Okay. Hi, Cormac. How are you?
I'm well, Douglas. How are you? And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Nice to have you on this show. Thank you for coming.
Good to be with you.
So, you've got a book out called The Connected Community Discovering the Health, Wealth, and Power of Neighborhoods. And I see it behind you there. We
That's
will
right.
talk about that in a second, but there was something on your bio that I wanted to hit right away. It says that you are a social explorer amongst author and speaker and managing director. What is a social explorer?
Well, the reason I use the term social explorer is I'm trying to emphasize the importance of being curious rather than being helpful. So it's about emphasizing a posture. A social explorer, at least to my mind, is somebody who's going in to be alongside people, be a companion, be curious, rather than arriving into a community as a hero with the answers. Their posture is one of curiosity and exploration.
So, the company that you work for, or is your company, your managing director, is that what you guys do?
Yeah, so we work across 36 countries, jurisdictions around the world, and essentially from various degrees. We're getting alongside in the UK a lot of NHS, National Health Service trusts, local authorities, sometimes at a very, very granular local level alongside communities that want to address particular possibilities or challenges that they're facing. So we've worked in Rwanda and Singapore, all over the world, really. I've just, before I came on this call, speaking with some folks in Iran who are interested in having our support. And a lot of what we're doing is walking alongside them, but through a very particular lens, really thinking about the strengths and the resources that they have within them and around them to address whatever it is they want to address.
Is this like a corporate version of the Peace Corps?
No, I suppose in a sense, how I would think about it is that increasingly people are rejecting the idea of even the Peace Corps, dare I say, although I don't want to in any way say anything negative about them because they do amazing things. But I think the difference might be in the pedagogy and the way that we're approaching things. And again, it's not that we're better than they are, but it's different. And the difference I think is that instead of starting with a focus on what's wrong and then trying to come in to address what's wrong, we're starting with a focus on what's strong and trying to support the communities themselves to be in the driving seat of change. Now, Peace Corps may say they're doing the same thing. I don't want to argue with that. But certainly, what we're trying to do, I think, is very, very different than parachuting as outsiders into communities. So we only go places we're invited. And we're largely working very much with the community in the lead. So it's not a relief methodology. It's very much about finding what are the strengths within that community, often that the community themselves have lost sight of. So I think those are important differences.
Okay, can you give me an example of why someone might call your company to come?
Well, for example, with Singapore, we've worked with a number of hospitals, and they've wanted to pivot from a model of health which is about addressing sickness to a model of health which ironically is about promoting health across a population. So we've worked with Yishun Health, which is a hospital, but also a set of partnerships that are working with the health of 2 million people. And what they're interested in is how you can make that possible, how you can actually promote health in a way that's led by people. So their traditional experience is about dealing with people on a one-to-one basis around sickness. So they'd call us in because we know how to work with entire communities and we know how to tap into the health creating capacity of those communities rather than showing a professional how to deal with a sick person on a one-to-one basis. So that's one example. We're working with the Welsh Prison Service, where we're journeying alongside them, and 100 men who we call community returners rather than ex-prisoners who are returning back into their neighborhoods, often neighborhoods where they've committed crimes. And we're trying to support those men to return back as gift givers, as people who are bringing contributions back to the community and hopefully, and I think it's more than just hopeful, we're supporting those men to be seen and recognized as contributors in their own community. It's a very, very different model to the old style probation models, which are about punishing and about ensuring that people fulfill the license of their probation release. So it's working in a very, very different way. So in a sense, an institution would approach us because they want to think about a citizen and community-led way of addressing the issue rather than just an institutional top-down way of addressing the issue. And also because they know, we know how to work with communities to ensure they're in the lead of that change.
Let me ask you just quickly about that. Did you find that the people that were returning to the communities from prison were open to rehabilitation? Were they interested in going straight, so to speak?
As you'd imagine, it varies. And again, I think a lot of it has, to do with the story and the experience of the trauma and whatnot of the person. But the people that we're working with are choosing by consent to be in this process. So they've got to show up. So they have a responsibility to victims. They have a responsibility to the wider community, their family and themselves. And largely what we're doing is getting alongside them at the individual level and finding out what skills they have and then finding out what the neighborhood needs. So, for example, traditionally what would happen is those 100 men would be going into probation centers, meeting with their probation officer, hopefully fulfilling the terms of their license. There's all kinds of opportunities to flip that idea on its head. So about 5 of the men a couple of weeks back identified a local gym, a kind of a spit and sawdust gym that had gone into disrepair in one of the local neighborhoods where they'd come from. And they're putting their efforts into working with the guy who used to run that, but fell into hard times, doesn't have the resource to run it himself anymore. And they're working with him to reopen that as a functioning gym for the wider community. That creates a new story. It says these guys can actually put some sweat into doing something solid and, productive immediately, but also then contributing that back to the community. They get a place that they can, work out in, but also they're beginning to redefine the terms of their story. So they now get to be known not just as the guy who did whatever, but also as the guy who's come in and done something useful for people in the neighborhood. And that's what we have to do, whether it's people who have committed a crime or people with mental health issues or people with disabilities. Often the issue is that they're being defined by the sum of their problems or their limitations or their pathologies or their sins, or call it what you will. And what we're trying to do is support them to find a valued social role in authentic terms. We're not making this up. This isn't about, giving them some kind of a false choreographed contribution, but it's about what is it that they can do that's actually really needed in the neighborhood. And then how do we support the community who often might struggle to receive those contributions or gifts, to receive them. So that's the piece. It's both helping the person discover they have a contribution and really encouraging them to see the value of making it. But also then it's that old, adage of a gift is not a gift until it's given, but it's also not a gift until it's received. Now, we also know, to go back to the idea of the prisoner, that if a guy, or indeed, it doesn't matter what the gender is, quite frankly, if somebody comes out of prison and they can form 6 productive relationships, they can connect with 6 neighbors, and they can do things that actually give them a valued social role, the chances of them not returning to prison are just exponentially greater than taking them out of prison, giving them $46 or whatever it is in different states, and then they fall back into the same network that they were in before to survive. That just doesn't work. And that's why we're seeing such a high level of recidivism. It's almost surprising when the current system does work, quite frankly. So you can do the data wash, and anything that improves on that really poor current system will probably show an enhancement. But we're going for broke, and we really hope that a very significant percentage of these 100 men over the next couple of years actually find a meaningful connection in their communities and vice versa.
We've got just about 3.5 minutes left, and I want to get to your book. So is the book basically a summary of what we've just been talking about and what your company has been doing?
So I've written the book with a luminary, I suppose you could say, in the North American context, John McKnight, who's 92 years young this year, and he's been working across the last 60 years in the US particularly. So we co-authored the book to share stories about our experience of working at neighborhood level across the world. And so really, it's not about just what my company, Nurture Development, does, my social enterprise, but it's really about our journeys as friends, working with people, as we call it, social explorers. But it's not about us. It's actually about the communities, and effectively, it's a book for doers. So anybody who's interested in building their community from inside out, using what's strong and starting there rather than what's wrong. This is a how-to guide for them. It essentially gathers together collectively 90 years worth of experience around the world and breaks down into nice, followable, enjoyable stories. So stories that people can follow, but also recognize, but also really, really practical tools. So if you want to get out and organize your community at a neighborhood level as a neighbor, it shows you how to do that in a pretty enjoyable, easy to follow read.
Uh, Quickly, how did you get started with all of this?
Well, I started out as a clinical psychologist in Ireland, working with kids who had become wards of courts. So they were essentially taken off their parents and put in various group homes. And I started my career, I suppose, at a time in Ireland where a lot of the very big institutions were being shut down. And we were creating what we called community care. So this is where kids were actually being moved into neighborhoods, into villages, into towns, in communities. But what wasn't happening was they weren't being connected properly into communities. So effectively, we were taking them from big institutions and putting them into smaller institutions. And my passion is to support people to actually recognize that they have worth and that they have potential, and particularly people who've been pushed furthest to the edge, making the stranger a friend and actually bringing them into having a good life. So I thought very quickly, I've trained to be the wrong thing, and started getting really interested in the idea of how do we get neighborhoods to actually start recognizing their own power and potential. And I think now more than ever, I'm recognizing that's not just about supporting kids. It takes a village to raise a child, but it's also important in responding to energy crisis. It's also hugely important around responding to the loneliness epidemic. We know that 85% of what determines our health actually relates to what we do at community level. It's not about medicine. So there's no better medicine for our health than community. And that's how I got started. And, in 1996, I set up Nurture Development to really get more into thinking about what would happen if we placed community at the center of a lot of our challenges, as opposed to institutions or the strong man or the hero who's going to come riding over the hill to save the day. And I'm pretty convinced, having seen what I've seen around the world, that's actually the way we need to go in the future. It's what our planet needs, as well as what our local communities need.
Well, on that, I'm going to have to wrap it up because we are out of time. My guest is Cormac Russell, and the book is called The Connected Community. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
Sure. So I think lots of free stuff on the website I'm about to give. So it's called theconnected.community. So www.theconnected.community will get you more information about the book, but more importantly, lots and lots of free stuff to get you started in your own neighborhood.
Super. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This was quite interesting, and best of luck with the book and all of your endeavors.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it, and Happy New Year again. Take care, Douglas.